Hannah, anytime I listen to a podcast where I know there's going to be a guest, I always wonder what exactly the guest is doing while the podcast hosts do their little intro, and how long the hosts are going to go on, making their guests feel uncomfortable just sitting there waiting, wondering if they should start speaking yet. Care to comment on that, Hannah?
Sometimes it's like 5 minutes and they're just like sitting there like, ah.
Care to comment on that, Tom?
I'm staring into your eyes right now, just waiting for the ample moment to jump in, give you that crisp, buttery interview episode.
Well, I guess you found it. So, audience members, please welcome our latest guest, our friend, collaborator, inspirer, perspirer, probably, Tom Peters. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
We're just going to have a nice, chill, low-stakes chat about filmmaking because you're a nice, chill, low-stakes dude until you get all worked up and you get excited and you're talking about Tarantino and blaxploitation and VHS movies.
Yes, I do like my blaxploitation. I do like my VHS. If anything, like I actually recently started like delving more into it. I watched like Across 110th Street, which kind of directly goes into the Tarantino stuff because he uses a lot of like blaxploitation soundtracks and actors in his movies.
Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised. It's definitely not as happy or bright as some of the other ones that I've watched, but shout out to Across 110th Street. Definitely check that one out.
Nice. Maybe we'll put it onto the list.
Yeah.
So you're in the filmmaking space. Now we obviously know you, but for our audience members, what kind of film collaborator would you say you are? Are you an actor, director, camera op? Where do you fall?
The best way that I usually, not that I introduce myself that way, but the way that I consider myself is like a self-proclaimed artist.
Sure.
I like it because it kind of encompasses everything without being like, yeah, I'm an artist.
Sure, whatever.
But even then, like adding the self-proclaimed is still pretty, I don't know.
Own it, man.
Yeah.
You're an artist.
Yeah. Like when people say I'm an aspiring director, it's like, as soon as you want to do something, just call yourself that.
Yeah, you should just be able to be like, I'm a director, I'm an actor. But yeah, I like it because it encompasses everything. Like I've done a lot of acting, I've done some directing, producing, and just like I love to have my toes in every facet of production. But honestly, like if I were to pick one, it'd probably be directing. I love just like, well, the writing directing combo. I like to be able to, put those on the screen and getting to have a touch in every facet of the production. Rather than just kind of single out, like I'm just going to be acting on this. I'm just going to be producing this thing. Directing enables me to do like a little bit of everything, which I really, really enjoy. So self-proclaimed artist, but mostly director focused, I'd say.
Would you say you're inspired by auteurs?
By auteurs?
Yeah.
I think some of my favorite artists were probably all quote unquote, or how would you constitute an auteur? Like someone who writes and directs their own stuff, like a Tarantino
Not
type?
necessarily.
Writes and directs, but just like has an overall strong vision. Like I don't know if I would say Steven Spielberg is an auteur.
No, well, his is a little more subtle. Maybe you could maybe argue that, but someone like Wes Anderson, David Lynch, where it's like their body of work is very clearly defined, and you can look to all their films and say like there's these common traits that they share. Whereas someone else, maybe it's like each film is different, like Sam Raimi.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think auteurs, and you mentioned specifically David Lynch, I think is huge inspiration in that space because he just like, he has an idea, and as crazy as that is, he does that and he does it through. So 100% art, like auteur inspired.
Nice. Now tell me how you fell into the realm of filmmaking and what led you to this point in your career.
That's always an interesting question to answer because I never know how far back to go.
Far back as you want.
As far as I could remember, it's always been something that I've been interested in doing. Even as a kid, like I used to make up characters and just like do little bits and little like puppet shows even for my family and friends. I had this character called Dr. Push, and he was like this doctor that had like a flashlight in his pocket,
Aw.
Dr. Posh is like Dr. Pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just like,
Funny.
Well, because you grew up speaking French, right?
yeah, it's my first language.
Yeah.
So I actually only started or learned English at about 11 years old. So
Oh,
it's
that
been-
late, eh?
Yeah, that
I didn't
late.
know that.
Like you kind of had to, even in French school. Otherwise, you were kind of put into a little corner. But anyway,
It's a good skill.
yeah. So as far back as I can remember, like just making characters, doing like little shows. But even in high school, me and my friends, we used to just make like, I don't even know how to call them. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of, like Filthy Frank or some of these like a little.
Like skits, like YouTube used to be the landscape of making like sketches or whatever.
Yeah, they were very kind of like raunchy
Sure.
sketches, and we used to basically try and homage that and do all sorts of just crazy videos that I record on my phone. I'd edit them on like iMovie, export them at like 1080, 720, like didn't even care, put them on YouTube, and it actually got pretty successful. Like one of our last videos got about like 4,000 views,
Nice.
which was
That's great.
Yeah,
Mhm.
pretty happy about that. So even before college, even before I actually went into Algonquin for like film and media, I was still making videos. I was still making content, and yeah, there's definitely a huge through line at like every single point. Stop motion, like I said, puppet shows. But when it really begun, like for real, I think would be after college.
After college.
After
Interesting.
college,
And
yeah.
what did you go to college for?
I went to Algonquin College for film and media production,
Mm-hmm.
where I met some really good friends, collaborators, and had a lot of learnings. It was a great experience. I'm glad I went for the connections mostly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is no film school like the one you make for yourself.
Definitely.
And that's something that's very echoed by a lot of those directors that we mentioned earlier in the episode. Like Tarantino himself didn't even go to film school, and his whole thing is like, make your first movie, take that first step, and you'll have so many learnings from that. So
Definitely.
that's that experience. I kind of had a bit of both, which is cool. But my first movie was definitely that first step, if you can call it that.
Yeah. So after college, what would you say happened that was different from learning in a classroom? Because we experienced that. It's like a lot of learning in a classroom, a lot of learning about like theory, but actually like having hands on cameras and stuff was important. Now for us, our program didn't exactly set us up for success after the program and finding work and finding connections. So how did you bridge that gap from college to working on set and finding opportunities?
I actually got pretty lucky because they set us up really well. As far as I know, though, I think we were about 40 people, and there's maybe like
small.
5-6 of us that are still actively working in the industry.
Yeah, that happens.
A lot of them dropped out. It's a tough
tough.
business. It was a tough program. But we were really well set up in the sense that like we had placement. They had connections with a lot of the big like Ottawa and beyond. Even beyond Ottawa, I think they had some more connections for different studios and different directors and producers that they would line us up with. A lot of people did partnerships or internships with One Department, Fireside, these different companies. I had a bit of a different one though. I did a Nigerian feature film.
Ooh, cool.
That was in Ottawa for about like 2 months that summer. And that actually, rather than breaking me into the kind of more, I don't know if you call it like high-end Ottawa production side of things, it broke me into more the indie side, where I met some like great people, some great directors, and it was a really interesting experience. I actually got to play like a ghost on that movie.
That's amazing.
I was like one of the only white guys on set. They were like, yo, let's put some makeup on you and throw you in that scene.
And so did you just act or did you do anything behind the camera?
I was, because it was placement, I was there as like I think it was like, they called me third AC. So I did some like lens swaps. I was just there to help with camera.
Grabbing fresh batteries and stuff.
Yeah, like literally anything
Just a
they wanted.
shadow, basically.
There was actually this guy, his name was Toka, and there was this fight between him and the DOP between like who would get to like keep me as their like little helper of sorts. and this guy was like this tall, like 6'4", just like really buff big guy, and I'm pretty light, right? So this guy used to like literally like grab me away from the DOP, just straight up pick me
Oh
up,
my gosh.
put me on stuff.
That's crazy.
It was pretty fun. It was a great experience, and yeah, I'm super grateful for it, because like from there I got to go on like literally straight from that movie, I got to go on a show, and then met some more people, and it just kind of like ballooned from there. So
Nice. And how does that bring you towards what you're doing today? How would you best describe what you're doing these days?
well, these days obviously we work together.
Mhm.
For Extreme Line Productions, we do a lot of like more, I don't know if you'd label it corporate stuff, but we do some kind of internal videos. We do commercials,
And documentary, I would say.
documentaries as well.
Mhm.
But for me personally, my focus as of late has been mostly on independent shorts,
Mhm.
stuff that I'm directing myself, that I'm also helping produce. We're doing a big push for grants at the moment, getting funding from the government, from other sources, just to make it more viable, because we've been at a point where like we'll save a lot of money, we'll spend it on these shorts, and then we're like, oh well, I gotta wait like 6-7 months until I can make another one.
Yeah.
And I think just like long term, it's important to scale our work and to be able to just make it viable for everybody. We want to pay actors. We want
Mhm.
to have money for distribution. We really want to make something of the independent scene. So I'd say that that's definitely my focus. And I think I want to ask you for yourself, even because you just recently made a feature film, your first feature film,
Mhm.
Coffee to Cocktails,
Yeah.
which was a really fun experience. I was actually I was on set for that and at the
Mhm.
premiere.
Yeah, it was
You
great to
had a
have you.
cameo. in
Did a
it.
cameo too?
Yeah.
So yeah, my focus is mostly on independent directing, indie shorts, indie movies, and then trying to scale that. But you, as of late, have been making more moves to make some more features, make some more shorts. What's your move in that? What's your kind of direction?
I just want to have fun, in all honesty. Like, that's part of why we started this podcast, and why we are continuing the podcast until it's fun, and then stopping the podcast when it's no longer fun. And so Coffee to Cocktails was a big experiment for me, a testing ground, a proving ground to see, like, can I put together a production like this? Do I have what it takes to direct a set? And then just trying to learn as much as possible. So I'm in a big transitionary period right now. And I would say the main thing that I'm doing is figuring out who in Ottawa I can work with, who are good connections, who want to work with me, and sort of like trying to build a little mini pool and dip into kind of the Kino crowd a little bit. And like I said, make some new connections and just see what kind of resources I have moving forward. And then it's like, okay, what can I do with these resources? How can I apply that to the next project and like scale a project to the resources that I see in my pool, if that makes sense. You know?
As a producer of your work, I think grants are also sort of the next thing we're looking at. So it's
Definitely.
more viable to make something a bit bigger, especially like paying crew. Like you said, maybe having some special effects, like putting more effort into production design, because we had such a small scope for Coffee to Cocktails. We like tried to do almost the bare minimum with like, with it still looking decent and stuff. So for this, maybe you just have like a push in our next project.
Well, it
to
also
focus
like
on that.
it actually made me pretty uncomfortable to make Coffee to Cocktails and not to pay people, because I
Yeah.
definitely believe people's time and talent is worthwhile.
Mhm.
And I tried to reward people as best I could. After I gave out some kind of meager gift bags, but it was the best I could do at the time, and
Mhm.
offering to take headshots for the actors and stuff, and mainly I saw it as a symbiotic relationship with the actors, that I would give them a lot of content for their demo reel, because it's a lot of talking and close-ups and stuff that they might not necessarily
Mhm.
get for their reel if they're doing background work or something.
Right.
Mhm.
But it's a huge priority to be able to pay people going forward, or at least if not pay them directly with cash, then at least find a suitable way to reward them
Yeah.
for what I feel is worthwhile time and
For sure.
energy.
Well, I must say, as someone who was on set and who did receive some of these quote unquote meager gift bags, um, I think you guys did a great job of making people feel appreciated, feel like they really had the space to experiment and they belonged. And like, I don't think that anybody walked away from that project feeling like they, could have had more or anything like that sort. But also, I want to highlight the fact that you guys made this in like 6 months, I think it was.
Yeah, 10 production days, and then there was pre-production, post-production.
It was about 6 months and 2 weeks from the point where I was like, I'm going to write this to the point where we premiered it at the Mayfair. It was about 6 months and 2 weeks.
Which is wild. This is crazy. Like, that's really, really good timing for a first time feature film as well.
Yeah.
But also the Mayfair idea that you just mentioned, huge. There's a lot of like scalability, especially for these indie films. We just had actually a film by Emilia Potoshniak and Jesse Coombs called "This Is the End." This isn't the end. It's very, very different there.
Yeah.
But they actually just premiered at the Mayfair, and to great success.
That's awesome.
We actually were having another short later, closer to December, do the very same thing, and all because of that initiative that you guys took to premiere Coffee Cocktails at the Mayfair and have a premiere and have it actually, have that space and time to breathe and to be on the big screen. So huge shout out to you guys for that, because like that's big, and now it's being taken up by the indie industry, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to really get to like, show our stuff, show our work, not just have it sit on like a live drive or just slap it on YouTube.
Celebrate each other's works, and it takes a lot of time and effort. So
it does. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and screening at the Mayfair was an absolute delight.
So fun.
Getting to get together and like invite a bunch of people and see who came out and be like, oh, you came? Man, that warms my heart. It was awesome. And the after party was great too. I will say, little word of advice. If you're thinking of doing a screening at the Mayfair at a similar theater, just double check the film festivals that you may want to submit your film to before you do that, because some of them will not accept a film if it's already premiered somewhere nearby or in Ontario or Canada. So
because they want the
just
premier
be aware
status.
of that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great tip. I didn't think of that.
Because we kind of knew going into it, like, we're like, okay, we'll probably like do film festivals and some of them want premiere status, but we'll probably not get into those, like Sundance or whatever, just because this is a small scope project. But you kind of were like, maybe like we should have submitted to TIFF. We can't because we already premiered it.
The acceptance rate for TIFF is like something like 1%.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have been accepted even if it did, because like I said, a lot of this movie was about things behind the scenes, learnings and experimenting behind the scenes. The stuff on camera was not really what it was about. And Coffee to Cocktails in particular, I feel like is almost an unsellable movie, because it's just, there's no incentive for anyone to watch it who was not a part of it. Like if someone is looking for like a quirky experimental indie production, maybe, but like for a streaming service, like I don't think there's any incentive for anybody scrolling on a streaming service to be like, how about this? Like, it's just, I don't think it's that kind of movie. It's not a crowd pleaser.
Well, I think there is maybe a niche market for it, because sometimes I am like that, where I'm like, this is this weird like indie film that I saw a trailer for, like let's watch it. But I think that's a lot smaller segment.
It's a lot more niche.
The movies that Coffee Cocktails was directly inspired by have a lot of that essence within them, and you guys definitely checked them out to make this movie. So I'd argue that there is a space for it, probably. I definitely understand like what you're saying. It's definitely not like guns, explosions, kung fu, and but like there is a space for it, and people came out. I think there is interest in it more than just for the technicality of it being like an indie film or like a local film. You guys got a great set that was built. It looks like a coffee shop, but it's not technically. It's
my dad's
your
basement.
dad's basement. Yeah.
Which is flooded now. It got flooded and all like the floors had to be torn up and half the set got destroyed. But pour one out for the set.
So no sequel, I guess.
Yeah.
No.
But, we'll see what happens with Coffee to Cocktails. We submitted it to a handful of film festivals a couple weeks ago with Kevin, helped out with that aspect of it. So I think we submitted to like something like 19 categories across 15 or so different film festivals. So fingers crossed that we get into one, because I think,
Yeah, at least.
I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your personal film journey, I think the most important question on both of our minds right now is, do you think you'll ever bring back Dr. Pocket? Do you think there's a future?
I was thinking that, like, it seems like puppetry is like in the roots of what you were doing. Like, it would be really cool to see like some kind of stop motion or puppetry short film or something.
Yeah, I actually used to do a lot of stop motion back in the day with I think a lot of people used to do it with Legos.
Sure.
But I think there is an opportunity. I'd have to, because there is like a pretty significant part of my identity and just my life that was very rooted in like the French language and stuff. I think that there's definitely an interest to start experimenting with like French films, different French like artists and different things. Like there's Asterix Obelix, which I recently rewatched. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that.
Not that one, no.
It's probably one of the most like famous French cartoons. Like you can
Oh.
literally buy all the movies, like the box set at like Costco. They made like live action movies. But anyway, I think that there's definitely a chance and an opportunity and an interest for me to start experimenting with French content. If I were to, and it was a comedy and there was a space for it, probably
Sure.
I could definitely see that coming back. I think my mom would really like that, because
Oh.
she's probably the only person who actually remembers me doing that. But yeah, as far as like stop motion goes, though, I think I'd love to maybe incorporate that and have someone who knows stop motion, lives and breathes animation.
Yeah.
I know that there's like a kind of weird dream sequence or just like other little snippets like that you can incorporate it in. I would
Yeah.
love to try and like blend animation with those live action variants, because
Like miniatures almost. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
miniatures as well. Like I think there's a huge thing to be said for like practical effects.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
A big thing that we did recently this summer with my technically second short film, Grime, is I experimented with squibs.
Nice.
So I actually had one of those, like, I don't know if it's like called like a garden pump, but it's basically like it's used to like spray.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we had that attached to like a clear kind of like it was basically a tube that we cut a hole through it and then we clogged, and then we had it taped to our actress's chest, just right under her shirt. We put like a little hole in it. And then it was just like pumping like 250 times, filled the hole with blood, and then just shot like everywhere. And it was actually really, really sick to do practically in camera. And matter of fact, that whole film is practical. We shot it all on VHS.
Cool.
Rather
Love
than just doing like a filter, which would have saved us so much time, because like those cameras do not do well in low light, and we were in a
No.
forest
Yeah.
with no lights.
It's much more authentic, I guess.
It's just like experimenting with, getting the chance to experiment with these films, getting the chance to actually push those boundaries and test yourself, but also just like it just looks so much better actually doing the real thing, having the real squibs, having the real tapes recording it. I think it was just definitely the right call, and I'm very proud of that. So yeah, there's 100% a space for more practical effects, miniatures, SFX makeup, all these kinds of things, like 100%.
And that was called Grime, right?
Yes, Grime in all caps.
Grime in all caps. And is that finished? Is that available somewhere? Can we watch it?
It's not quite finished. I actually have another short that we are working on before Grime can come out.
Right, okay.
This was a short that we did for, I think it was for Digi60 back in late 2022, co-directed with good friend Sydney Ward. And we're really just trying to get that one out before we can do Grime, because actually, it was definitely shot much earlier than that, but also because Grime there's a plan for that. There's
Okay.
definitely a plan for that. But what I can say is that it's closer to maybe a June release for that short.
Okay,
Alright.
gotcha. And
Exciting.
I'm asking more for my own curiosity at this point. But are you editing it digitally, or are you editing it
Did you
analog,
transfer
like
it?
on a
I'm a-
VHS system?
I would have loved to edit it on a VHS system, but it's all in Premiere, so it's definitely
Okay, yeah.
still digital, because there are non VHS components.
Oh, okay,
So
That's cool.
gotcha.
I like
Yeah.
the mixed media.
yeah, it's very like it's very little. I'd say like 90 to 95% of the movie is actually just VHS. There's maybe like 3-4 shots that are not. So it's still very much a VHS experimental. But yeah, there are like very few non VHS components.
I guess it gives you a little more wiggle room to edit non-linear, you know. I think that's like why the industry does it now pretty much exclusively, is even if they shoot it on film, they transfer it to digital just because you have that wiggle room.
It's just so much easier, right?
Yeah.
Like who wants to edit film like that, you know?
I
Like,
don't know. Yeah.
even as far as like shooting on film, you're setting yourself up for like so much pain. Like, I get it. It's great. I would
Yeah.
love to shoot on film, but also digital, just like, even I think it was Roger Deakins, like one of the greatest like directors of photography of all time, was like, yo, like, come on guys, like let's just do digital.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, how like Quentin Tarantino, who's a director, so he, like someone else, the director of photography, is worrying about how it's going to look and how it's going to turn out, whereas
it's not Quentin's job.
Yeah, he's like, film is just the best, and it's like, I don't know why anyone wouldn't shoot on film and stuff. And then Roger Deakins, who it's like his actual job, is like, no, like it's so much easier to look at it like right there and be like, okay, it's perfect, instead of like getting it back like a couple days later, seeing that it's all corrupted, and then having to do reshoots. It's just like so much easier to have the instant feedback to make changes and make it like better on the day.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting argument.
Yeah.
on a technicality, like, I think that it's fair to say that like Rogers, he's definitely the guy to consider when talking about, you know, what's best, whether digital or
Right.
film. But at the same time, I can't help but just be like, you know what, like, Quentin's vision is to do film. Christopher's vision, Zack Snyder does film. You know what?
Sure.
Let those guys have it. Let those guys have it.
Like, film is great. You know, it's a great medium. And if you can afford to do it, if, you know, you have a team that's good and can do it, sure. But that's just, you know, a method of doing it. You know, there's more than one way to make film. And what we don't like is how he's snobby about it. He's like, no one should be shooting digital, like it's ruining cinema.
He's like, that's the death of film as I know it.
So
Like-
we're just really like annoyed at that. We're like, you know, there's just so many different ways to make a film, and I think there's so many great digital films out there that I think just completely write off digital as, you know, too broad.
Yeah, he's a little protective of that, right? Like he's a bit intense with the film. I think it was like even Inglourious. It was Inglourious Bastard, or no, Hateful Eight. He wanted it to like be like screened and premiered like a specific way.
Yeah, like in CinemaScope or something like that.
Was it 85 millimeters?
Yeah.
Just how we wanted it. Like, I don't know.
Something
Which
like
isn't
that.
the standard. I think standard is 35 millimeter. I think. I don't know.
But hey, man makes good movies. So
Yeah.
like, he,
Sure.
as far as I'm concerned, he can be snobby all he wants.
It's just his attitude and his
Yeah.
seemingly misunderstanding about like why digital is so, like, the way that I think about it is like, imagine you have a piece of wood in front of you, right? And one person is carving that piece of wood with a pocket knife and it takes them hours, and another person is carving it using a CNC machine that they program, and then it just does it. And Quentin's like, I just love the natural look of carving it by hand. It's just so much more worth it. And then the guy over there carving the wood is like, dude, you don't have like the blisters all over your fingers, man. You're just sitting there watching me carve the wood. Whereas Roger Deakins is the one programming the machine, and he's like, oh, I'm so glad that I don't have to use that pocket knife to carve the wood anymore. Like, saves me so much time. It's so much easier. And then Quentin's like, carving wood with a CNC machine is the death of wood carving as I know it.
But at the same time, could you imagine being Tarantino in his early years, like making his first movie on film and like struggling with that, having to like wait until the next day, or like actually not even the next day, like he waited until he was pretty much done filming, like halfway through, until he could see the footage, and like going through all that shit just for like people like us to be able to film movies on our phones. I'd be pissed off too.
But the thing is, Roger Deakins is significantly older than Quentin Tarantino. He's been through it. He's had decades of experience.
Working on film and digital
with celluloid. And he's like, forget it. It's dinosaur technology.
Yeah.
I'm over it.
But that's just the difference between a technical professional and an artist. As far as like, you know, Roger Deakins like can be considered an artist, and
Definitely.
I think I would consider him that.
Yeah.
His job is to, you know, get the frame, light the shots. It's essentially mostly technical, whereas Tarantino sees images, the big picture. So like, there's a bit of a distinction there where like clear.
Sure.
But I think it's also the case of like, you know, the two older gentleman types of like, back in my day, we used to do it like this. And the like, I just don't give a shit anymore. You know what I mean?
To me, it feels like gatekeeping, though. He's like, I had to struggle and I had to spend a lot of money on film. And I don't like that people don't have to struggle and that they don't have to spend a lot of money on film, and that anyone can make a film and it's not just people who can afford to make a film.
Right.
Again, it's like, it's the attitude, because we were just reading out of the Wes Anderson collection last night, or maybe the night before, and Wes Anderson's attitude about it is so much nicer than Quentin's, where Wes Anderson is like, yeah, we're probably moving towards an industry where everything is going to be digital and there's not going to be any, you know, we're not going to be able to film on film anymore. Like, they'll probably stop selling it. But my preference is always just to film on like Kodak, CinemaScope. Like, if I have the choice, option, that's what I prefer.
Yeah.
But he's not like turning his nose up and being like, it's the death of cinema.
Yeah. No, I definitely see what you guys mean.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I think it stems from like a really, really deep, like, you can tell this guy cares about movies. He cares about.
Sure, yeah.
He literally, his first book, like, is all about the history of movies and filmmaking. And like, he definitely, not that he has like more to say on it, but like he knows and understands that, and he clearly has like a huge passion for it. So like, I can understand why he's so upset about it. But there's definitely directors that don't like, you know, get mad over it like that, or not berate you, but yeah, Wes Anderson definitely has a much better attitude when it comes to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I get it to a certain degree, like, you know, someone like David Lynch being like, people watching movies on their telephones or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you created something to be like a big scope, to be seen on the big screen, and people are watching it on this tiny little thing. Like, I understand that, like, as a creative, you know, I'll be editing, you know, huge megabyte images on a 4K giant screen, and then the clients will look at it on their phones and stuff. And it's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, you definitely want them to, you know, as I could say, the full picture.
Yeah.
Love David Lynch for that.
Yeah.
Although, like, I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely watched plenty of films on my phone, including David Lynch films. So.
Certain films, it's like, you know, it's very panoramic, very landscape, where it's like, maybe this would be better on the big screen. But other films, it's like, it's people talking. And it's like, what good is, like, what's the difference going to be whether I see this on like 10 inches or, you know, 3 feet? I don't know.
I actually have more of a problem with listening to a movie from phone speakers as opposed to watching it on a phone.
Sure.
Like, I will totally like sit in bed and watch a movie if I have nice headphones on or if I have a nice speaker. But if I'm like watching something and it's like out the little phone speaker, I'm like, just forget it.
Really?
Sure.
I'll bust out like 6 seasons of The Simpsons, like straight
Sure,
raw dogging phone speakers.
I'm not saying I'm above watching anything through my phone speakers.
Yeah.
I'm just like, if I'm sitting down and watching a movie for the first time, whether I'm watching it on the TV or in a theater or on a phone screen, that there's less of a difference to me. I can still find myself feeling engrossed. It probably comes from years of playing a Game Boy in the backseat of my parents' car and just like, you know, psychologically, metaphysically, the Game Boy enveloping my entire screen and it feeling like it's bigger than it is. But if it's just the, like, you know, the speaker's so bad, it's like, and I can barely hear the dialogue. It's like, that's more make or break for me.
Yeah. Speakers definitely, like, I think there's like a huge part about filmmaking that is often overlooked is sound.
Absolutely.
But like, you'll definitely keep watching a movie that's in like 720 or that like just looks shittier if it has good sound.
Like film, a lot of film, people are like, it just doesn't have the look of film. A lot of film looks kind of crappy. Like, people love film grain. That's like imperfections of the film. And like, that's great. Like, art is all about imperfections. But I think it's so funny that people are like, oh yeah, that's the superior way. Whereas digital, which is like crisp and pristine and like has all these like details, people are like, no.
Yeah, it's also like in the same vein of like having cinematic frame rate be set at like 24 when you can have it at like 60, which is like so much more realistic.
No, people don't want the realistic. Yeah.
Right? Like but then it kind of feels like a sitcom or like a reality TV show. So it's like it's weird how we like categorize like what makes it cinematic.
What are your thoughts on film grain? Because we saw The Exorcist a couple of years ago. That was supposedly like a restoration. We saw it at the Mayfair, and it was so grainy.
Had a lot of chromatic aberration.
I'm like, you know, I don't like despise film grain with a passion, but when it gets to the point where it's distracting and like you have a low light scene and all you see is like half the screen is just grain, I'm like, I don't understand why people love the film grain.
You're talking to a guy that shot
That's true.
on VHS in the dark.
Well, exactly. I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, why you like it.
I think that part of it, which is a bit unfortunate, comes from a bit of perfectionism, which is kind of like sounds unusual, but I think what it is that like those imperfections hide the other imperfections of like, for example, like not having perfect lighting or like your set design not being like kind of messying it up. It helps kind of like cover up, or like even as far as like this is something that was done like back in, you know, the 80s, 90s, 70s, like when they'd shoot on film, they used to have like these matte paintings for, you know, different outdoor shots or different things, and you would never see, or you could never tell that it was, because it was so grainy, and it would play on like a CRT 4x3, like,
that's right. Yeah,
like
video games,
tube TV.
Yeah.
So now having that upscaled, you can actually see that, okay, well, that's clearly a painting. That's clearly just like a flimsy little cup, or, oh, they left like a tag on this guy's coat, or like you can pick up on so much more, which is such a great thing, but also is a bit of a, it's a bit more of a challenge, because you have to like really make sure that your continuity is perfect. You know, everything's on point, that your actors are delivering exactly the way you want them to, that, you know, like just everything has to be, in addition to, you know, digital being crispier, your filmmaking and your process has to be better. So it's putting a bit more pressure on that end. And at the stage that I'm at in my filmmaking, like I definitely make continuity mistakes. I definitely make, you know, all sorts of different like goofs and gaps like that. Cause like, you know, we're working with like basically no budget, and oftentimes like these things are very impromptu. We have to move very quick, like makeup will smudge, things will fall off. And so like getting to not have to worry about it looking perfect all the time helps me focus on the actual, the craft and the story, and how I can actually bring that to life, rather than like, oh, like your flannel's a little, you know, loose or this or that. Like, but also just like in general, I love physical media. I love old media. So having that grain, having that 4x3 VHS kind of feel and look to it is very nostalgic.
Sure, yeah.
And I just love to experiment with it. So
I can understand that.
That's a very interesting answer. I think I'll have to sit with that for a while and think about how that relates to my thoughts on film grain. But it's true. Like there's certain TV shows that you watch that would have been shot in like the late 90s or early 2000s, designed to be transmitted to a standard definition CRT screen
On 4:3.
and have that quality hide their crimes. And then you watch like a Blu-ray restoration of it, and sometimes it looks good. Like Friends looks great, but then there's certain shows where it's like, I remember this looking much better than it did, and now that I'm seeing it crispy, it looks shabby.
Yeah.
It almost takes away from it.
Yeah,
in certain instances.
For
definitely.
sure.
There's a shot that I'm thinking of. I forget which episode it is, but in Twin Peaks, there's an establisher of like the Double R Diner, and they have like this big, nice, scenery in the back with like mountains and like a nice little sunset kind of thing, and it's clearly just a matte painting.
Sure.
And having it like I think it might be in the pilot because that's the 4K upscale that we have in the box set, but it's just like it's still cool. It's the 90s, like we can forgive it. But
the pilot was more low budget, I guess, as well.
Yeah, but the thing as well is that like because of that upscale, it makes it so like it's harder for us to experiment with paintings and like different practical effects because we know that they're not going to come off as great as they would have back in the day.
That's true.
And I love practical effects, so
yeah, definitely. I think we're a huge fan of practical as well.
Yeah, this is even like a topic that gets brought up a lot in old video games. Is like some people are in the camp where they feel like those games were designed to be seen on a CRT screen, and so they should only ever be played on a CRT screen with like pixels that kind of blur the image together and round out some of those shapes. And then there's people like me who I'm like, I want to see it in the crispiest, clearest HD quality. I don't need the pixels to blend together. I actually prefer seeing the individual,
like it's cute,
jagged edges because to me it's a intentional style. But I just wanted to round back to what you said about continuity and like hiding continuity mistakes. You might be interested to read In the Blink of an Eye if you've never read that before.
Absolutely.
It's a book on editing by Walter Murch, who I believe edited The Conversation and helped edit The Godfather.
Famous.
Yeah, it's I think it's actually like a transcript of a talk that he did on editing, but he talks in that about the different reasoning, like the hierarchy of reasons to make an edit and to make a cut, and like what you should be cutting for first as first priority versus what you should be cutting for last. And he actually says that the last thing that you should be cutting for is to preserve continuity. Because if everything else about that cut is working, like the emotion and the dynamic quality of the scene, then the audience actually won't notice if there's a continuity mistake.
It's true. Yeah.
And I've seen that in movies before where like
Terminator.
Terminator 2, we've talked about it before. There's the scene where he grabs the shotgun out of the guy's hand when he's leaving the biker bar. He grabs it with both hands. And in the one shot, he takes the one hand off of the gun. And then they cut to the other shot and his hand is back on the gun. And he takes his hand off again. But Arnold draws you into that scene so hard, and you feel such tension in that scene. You're on the edge of your seat that you don't notice that he takes his hand off the gun twice because it's working. And you don't notice when he bumps the mic because the rest of the conversation is dynamic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. I actually didn't notice that. I watched it
exactly
just 2 weeks ago.
That's right. Yeah.
That's very interesting you say that. And yeah, no, I agree. Like you definitely want to, like, technicality is important, but the work and the craft comes first.
Yeah.
I like what
you speak for itself.
Yeah. I like what you said about like it makes it easier. The messiness of it makes it easier. We were watching an indie film called Running Time, which is supposed to be like a oneer that was shot in the 90s on film. And he purposely made it black and white so he didn't have to worry about color temperature changing from indoor outdoor.
Wow.
Because he would do like 7-8 minute takes with no breaks.
Yeah, well, because with digital filmmaking, you can set it to auto white balance and it'll change. It might not change perfectly, but with film stock,
and you can adjust it.
I imagine you'd have to have daylight film stock and indoor film stock, and you can't
different ISOs.
Change in the middle of a transition.
Mm-mm.
So that was an interesting movie. We might talk about it at some point. But going back to what you said about physical media, I know that you're building a collection of physical media. I want to get your thoughts on that as the industry is shifting away from physical media and more streaming all the time.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like I love collecting just as a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But also I found that there's like a lot of movies and shows that I've been wanting to watch that just are not on streaming services. The biggest one that I'm into right now is Miami Vice, which like there are so many like all-star celebrities that actually got their start on that. I was watching I think it was like the 11th or 9th episode recently, and there was like a brief like 5-minute opening part with like Giancarlo Esposito, who
Oh,
like
yeah.
plays Gus in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis has a
Oh
part in the
yeah.
first season.
Yeah, he used to be a TV star.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on Moonlighting.
Like so many like A-list celebrities, Don Johnson, like, you know, Liam Neeson. There was like, anyway, but the fact is that show is not on any streaming service. And so if you want to watch it, you either have to pirate it or you have to buy it physically. And so I think that for me, it's really important to actually have those and have access to them, so that those streaming services like don't just take stuff away and then you know we lose access to some of the work that we want to watch. A really good example of that happening recently, and actually more importantly, a lot of these newer shows and these newer, you know, movies don't have physical releases, specifically like the Disney Plus
Yeah.
shows.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if you guys heard, but there was the Willow sequel. It was like the Willow show, and it was on the streaming service for like 6 months. It underperformed, didn't do very well with critics, and then they straight up just took it off.
Yeah, as a tax write-off, yeah.
Yeah, and they've been doing like a lot of tax write off recently, especially with like Batgirl and
Yeah.
Warner Brothers and stuff like that. But like that show literally does not exist anymore unless you pirate it. Like yes, it does exist, but like you cannot legally purchase it. You cannot legally watch it. There's no way to attain a license to go and see this show. So like, if that happened to Willow, if that happened to a Lucasfilm IP, which give it is not the biggest thing in the world, but that can happen to anything. That can happen to any movie, any show, and
For sure.
who's to know what's going to happen in 10, 20 years? Who's going to know like what your favorite show will be like? And another example is like one of the biggest shows, I think even the longest running in television history, like The Simpsons, was originally aired like the first 10 seasons or so, 4:3. Disney
Right.
Plus cropped it in. And so like, yeah,
You're cutting off detail.
you're cutting off details, and there's actual examples of some of the jokes in some of those episodes being lost.
That's irritating.
That's just stupid.
I hate that.
It's ridiculous, but it's because they want it to be more consumable. They want people that aren't as, you know, comfortable with 4:3 to be able to watch it. So like,
Boo.
you're you're letting those studios, you're letting those softwares and those streaming platforms to doctor and to remove and to change some of your favorite shows,
true.
and you don't have a say in that. So allowing yourselves to have streaming service, it's a great tool. It's really useful, and it's just it's much easier than to have to like, you know, buy physical media. But at the same time, like we used to do that for like, we did that for decades. It's not that big of a shift, and you get to preserve the original copy. You get to actually own it. You get to just always have access to it. And for me personally, like I know that there are people that just kind of watch movies on like the whatever, and it's not that big of a deal. But as like a film lover and somebody who watches them regularly, it's really important for me to actually own them, because like on a technicality, I'll say this as a disclaimer because I found this out recently. You never actually own a movie. It's only that you're purchasing a license for it. Like very technically, let's say you're buying the David Lynch collection on Criterion, and then Criterion loses the license to distribute it. You technically also lose that license, but it's not like Criterion or you know, whoever has the rights now is going to go to your house and take your copy of David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Sure.
Although very technically that's what could happen, and that's what those streaming services are doing. It's just that now they have the ability to do so because you don't have a physical copy. They can take that license away at any time. So
Things change, and it's very frustrating.
it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And we have to preserve that. We have to preserve these films. We have to preserve media. And who's to know, like, if we just allow these films and shows to live and breathe on these platforms and we don't actually, you know, preserve them ourselves, like there are lost shows. There's episodes of Doctor Who that do not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Because they were never transferred to physical. And obviously we didn't have the internet back then, but like that can and very much will happen to future movies, to future shows. And, you know, like Coffee to Cocktails, if you were to wipe all your drives of that movie, it wouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of indie shows, a lot of indie movies, a lot of smaller scale budget things, like we have to preserve those. We have to burn them on a disc, throw them out to as many stores as you can, give it to all your friends, all your family. We need to preserve these stories. We need to preserve this media, and lost media, lost films and shows is one of my biggest heartbreaks. I never want anybody's work to ever be erased because I know how much time and effort it takes to make those.
Definitely.
And we need to fight to preserve those. Like I really think that that's important. And there's even like whole genres that are practically impossible to find.
Yeah.
Blaxploitation, which we mentioned earlier, is one of my favorite genres. And if you're in the States, there's actually a subscription service you can sign up for.
That's cool.
With Amazon Prime that allows you to have a lot of these. But like, if you're here in Canada, like you basically have to pirate them. You can't find them at any stores, any thrifts. They're not on any platforms like streaming services. And these are like pioneers of like some of the most influential artists' careers. We mentioned so many times earlier today, Quentin Tarantino, his whole like, not his whole career, but like a lot of his movies have a lot of inspiration from like, you know, blaxploitation,
Absolutely.
all the Pam Grier movies and all these different projects. Like, how are we not going to have access to some of the best directors of our time's most influential work? That makes no sense to me. We need to have access to these things.
For sure.
I definitely agree. I'm a proponent of physical media. I just don't have the space for it in a small apartment like this. We used to have a whole wall of DVDs, and that was great, especially while recording the podcast, because it was like a visual representation of all of our favorite movies. And as we're talking about topics, we can just kind of look at it and be like, oh, that there, yeah. But unfortunately, the shelves that we had those on got destroyed in the Coffee to Cocktails flood of 2023. So we don't have them up right now. But the availability, again, it comes back to video games. That's a topic in video games as well. People don't feel so bad about pirating video game ROMs because the companies that made those games do not make them available. You know, a lot of those games, they'll have like a small section of the library streamable, again, on like Nintendo Switch Online, but many classic games, like they just don't sell them right now. And it's like, I could go on eBay and buy a cartridge, but that money isn't going to Nintendo anyway. So I'm going to feel that bad about pirating it, you know?
Another scary thing about video game physical media now is that they're not actually, the games aren't burnt onto the disc anymore. As far as I understand, it's basically just a license for you to unlock it digitally.
I've heard that about some games, yeah.
What a waste.
That's nuts.
Why would you even buy the disc, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe just the idea, a lot of people are like you, they want to have that physical representation like in their house, but it, you know, if it's going to become useless anyways, I don't know.
There's a bit of an emotional aspect to it as well. Like it's one thing to put on a movie that you like on a streaming service. It's another thing to like bust out the DVD and be like, this is the DVD that I got from Microplay in 2012 that I used my gift card that Ryan got me. Then I handed it to the guy and the gift card said to Andrew from Ryan, but the guy read it wrong and he thought my name was Ryan and he said, enjoy your DVD, Ryan. And I'm like, thanks, dude. And it's like that object in my hand has an emotional story tied to it that gets brought up when I pick it up off the shelf, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's and even as part as like collecting, like if you go to thrifts or you go and like hunt for stuff, or like you said, you have like a personal story for those, like you definitely remember that and almost like attribute that to the film itself. It like builds on that excitement, it builds on that feeling you have for it, which is like, I think it's important. We don't want to just like press a button, watch the movie, discard it the next day. Like it's more than that. It's more than just like a piece of entertainment. At least for us, I see it as homework. I see it as stuff to be studied, to be looked at. And so it's very important to, you know, give it the time of day and actually get to enjoy it to its fullest capacity. And it's also that like if you're watching it on Blu-ray, not so much like VHS and stuff like that. Like you definitely lose some resolution, but 4K, like you're never gonna get any drops in quality. Whereas like on Netflix, like who's to say your internet doesn't conk out and then you drop a couple frames,
it's
or
definitely
like
a drawback. Yeah,
it keeps cutting back and forth. Like you can get that 4K stream like uninterrupted, no problem.
No commercials.
No commercials.
Yeah. I think especially the older the media is, the harder it is to find. Like, I'm a big fan of older television shows like I Love Lucy. And as far as I know, none of that is on streaming. So if I didn't own that, I wouldn't be able to watch it. And I probably wouldn't even be able to pirate it because it's so old. Who wants a torrent of season 5 of I Love Lucy? I don't know.
You would love one of my latest thrift finds. I actually got like, I think it was 6 episodes, or actually no, it was like double that. It was like 12 episodes because it's 2 per tape of I Love Lucy on VHS.
I probably have that
You probably do.
in the bedroom. Yeah.
Oh,
We have a couple Lucy VHSs.
Yeah.
I'd have to check those out.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Now, we've circled the drain of this question through our whole conversation, but I love asking this question. What are 3 films that describe your tastes in movies? Because I would say when it comes to the films that you like, you kind of veer off in a different direction than I think most people would. You know, you're more into, I would say, I mean, I'll let you speak for yourself, but like the more artistic, kind of less crowd pleasing kind of movies, or movies that are just kind of doing their own thing, doing a different thing. Am I on the ball on this assessment, or
I
how'd you
am
comment on
not
that?
a fan of movies that are made to please people's moms.
Sure, yeah.
Love moms, but it's I guess what I'm trying to say is that like
family
Yeah.
friendly.
family friendly crowd pleasers. Like I want it to be something that a person like us, you and I, sat down and, you know, for like 5 years, 6 years, or like poured their time, their energy, their soul, like a passion project. Not a movie made to make more money, not a business venture. I want it to be an actual artist-driven creation. I want it to be a real project. I feel like a lot of these like more mainstream movies, they're a business venture, because at the end of the day, like, we're in a business. Film is a business. Money needs to be made. People need to get paid, and I understand that these movies like need to exist because just the way the world works, we're not gonna have a space for these more like auteur-driven films were it not for the Fast and Furious and the John Wicks of the world. But like,
I guess
That-
so.
doesn't mean we have to like make 10 of those. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bit ridiculous. But anyway, like, yes, I've actually been waiting for someone to ask me that question.
Oh, perfect.
So much so that I carry my favorite 3 movies, or not my favorite, some of my favorite movies
Yeah.
with me here in my bag.
Oh, sick.
Amazing.
And I carry them with me everywhere I go in the hopes that someone at the bus or just at the Circle K asks me that very question.
This
So-
is me in high school. You know, I'm like, hey, I got my
Absolutely.
Blu-ray copy of Rocky and my DVD copy of A New Hope just ready at a moment's notice in case.
Did you actually?
Yeah, legitimately.
So you could play it in class if
Yeah.
there's a lull.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
That's very old school. That's so
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, I'm gonna whip those out
Mm.
one by one, and
Sure,
then
yeah.
we
I'm
can
excited to see them.
we can pick whichever one you'd like to start with.
Sure,
Whatever order you want to go. Least favorite.
the most
favorite.
theatrical order.
The most theatrical order. Okay.
The order that's going to create the most theatrics for our audience listeners out there.
Okay. I'll start nice and easy.
Okay.
And I think we'll go. I'll do a little sandwich here.
Okay.
Okay.
So the
do
first
it.
one I have for you guys here today is Heat.
Okay. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
Oh man.
It's okay.
There's
It's
a
okay.
history of this.
There's a
film.
history for this movie.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay.
We're
We're all going to remain friends. It's fine.
Yeah.
really.
Let's hear it.
Okay,
Let's hear it.
Okay. I love Michael Mann. I'm a huge fan of neo noir films, specifically from
Sure.
the like 80s, 90s era. Another film of that kind of like space that I really enjoy. Like, I love it. I really do. It's Scarface.
Oh yeah.
I didn't want to bring it because
Al
like
Pacino Scarface.
Al Pacino
Yeah.
Scarface, because I always talk about it. I wanted to vary it up. I also really love Heat. You got De Niro, you got Pacino, and also, you know, Val Kilmer, like so many A-listers, so many good stuff. But also, it being a Michael Mann film, like I mentioned, really big Miami Vice fan. So naturally, I'm going to delve into some of his artwork, and this one in particular, just like really I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people criticize it for being like a bit too long or they get bored, but I love the tension that it builds. I love the more subtle moments that it has, but also just the fact that like, I don't know if you guys heard, but that one like gun scene that was so accurate that like they literally had U.S. Marines like look it over for training.
Oh wow,
It's
cool.
that good that like it's used in actual like U.S. Marine training for gun safety and all that sort of stuff. I think that's just the coolest. So yeah, Heat, really big fan of neo noir, really big Pacino fan, Robert De Niro, of course, and yeah, I think that's a good representation of that genre.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about each one as we go along, or do you want to produce all three and then talk about them?
Yeah, we can do one at a time. I don't mind.
Okay. Well, for Heat, I hope we can remain friends after this conversation.
Yeah.
We didn't finish it.
No.
We got probably 30 minutes in, maybe 40 minutes in, and we both got bored.
Okay. Do you want to hear
And
my
we're enjoying
review on Letterboxd of Heat?
Yeah.
Okay. 0.5 star out of 5.
What the?
Okay, and here it is.
Wait, you gave it a review after we didn't finish it?
For this, I made an exception. Things I would rather watch instead of Heat: a pot boil, paint dry, my neighbor's dog pee on my balcony again.
Hannah, are you kidding me?
I think we may have just killed a friendship here.
Listen.
I mean,
I did write that as a joke, obviously, and I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum, and I will totally give it another chance. If you say it's great, then maybe I should give it another chance. But at the time, and I love those actors, and I love a good heist movie.
I love 2/3 of those actors.
Okay.
who do you not like? Who's
let's let Hannah
Probably.
finish.
And so, like, I wanted to like it. I just didn't. And, like, the whole time we were watching it, I'm like, Andrew picked this movie. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not liking it, whatever. And then at a certain point, he's like, do you want to just, like, not watch this movie anymore? I'm like, yes.
It's been long enough that I don't even really remember what I didn't like about it.
Yeah.
Is it a slow build kind of movie or
100%?
Okay.
I think that you guys are not in the minority in the sense that like the biggest criticism this movie has is that people get bored. Like it's like 3 hours and it's pretty slow.
That's fine.
I haven't written Heat off altogether. I'm totally willing to come back to it at some point.
Yeah, I'm not
If you want to do a movie night, we can do a
Yeah.
movie night and watch it. I'm willing to give it another chance because I didn't even give it a full chance the first time around.
I mean, you like Magnolia, and Magnolia is like a slow build. And I wasn't as into that
Magnolia's
as you.
long.
And that's pretty long too. So
Yeah, I think there's definitely finish it. It's long, but there's some really good stuff in it, and also there is a sequel coming out very soon.
interesting.
Yeah, like 30 years later, Michael Mann's doing it's like a prequel, and it has Adam Driver as a younger Robert De Niro,
Interesting.
and we haven't found out who's going to be casted as Al Pacino yet.
It's gonna be Al Pacino, just
I
playing
can
his
see that.
Playing
his
himself.
younger self.
De-aged.
In my eyes, see Oppenheimer. Thanks, Michael Mann.
But just for the sequel, I think that gives you a pretty good incentive to give it a second shot. Yeah, like obviously, like it's. I understand the criticism. It's a long movie. It takes its time, but me personally, like I've had times where I watched the whole thing on this very tape, and then rewinded it. Took the time to sit there and you know just wait for it to spindle back,
Mm-hmm.
and I popped it right back in. I
Interesting.
doubled it. 6 hours just back to back, heating it up. You know.
I like those kind of movies where it's like, as soon as the movie ends, it's like, let's throw it back on.
I did that with Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, I feel that way about a lot of
really?
albums.
The Jim Carrey one.
Yes, because there's so many elements to it, and like there's kind of a twist in the story. So I wanted to see it again with fresh eyes.
Fantastic pick. Jim
Mhm.
Carrey in a serious role,
So much
Um,
better than his comedic roles.
right? Like I'm guessing you've seen The Truman Show,
Yeah. Love that movie.
another really great
Yeah.
one. Yeah, I hope he does more work like that. I really
Yeah,
like when
for
he's
sure.
more serious in his roles. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's Heat. I hope you guys give it a second shot.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of my favorites. Definitely check out Scarface as well.
Absolutely.
All time classic.
Hmm.
It's another 3-hour movie, but it has a
Sure.
lot more. How would you say it? It's not as slow. It's definitely not as slow. There's more going on in that one for
They
sure.
they push it to the limit in that movie.
Sure. If Dog Day Afternoon is not in that bag, then that should be.
Can I be honest? I have no idea what you're talking about. Dog Day After that
It's like my favorite Al Pacino role.
You haven't seen Dog Day Afternoon?
I have not. I've
that
never even heard
that
of
is
it.
a heist movie
Wait,
starring
wait,
Al
wait.
Pacino. Amazing.
I just have one question for you. What are you doing? Not watching Dog Day Afternoon. Okay.
That needs
So,
to be on your list.
When I said I like 2/3 of these actors, I like Robert De Niro, I like Val Kilmer. I think Al Pacino is pretty overrated. I've seen The Godfather. He was good in that. I've
Yeah,
seen
he was good in that.
I've seen Scarface. His performance in Scarface made me a little uncomfortable.
What?
I've seen Serpico, didn't like it. And I've seen the first 30 minutes of Heat, didn't like it. But he stars in Dog Day Afternoon. And
So
he
good.
is great in Dog Day
Yeah.
Afternoon. I saw Scarface when I was like a teenager, preteen probably, and I thought it was pretty good. And then I rewatched it. You could hate me. I rewatched it with my brother, and we got like 45 minutes in, an hour in, and we were like, I'm thinking we shut this one off.
Wow.
I'm sorry. dude.
What about Glengarry Ross though? Didn't you like him
Glengarry
in
Glen
that?
Ross?
Yeah, yeah.
I did like Al Pacino in that. Have you seen
He was
Glengarry
pretty
Glen
good.
Ross?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's good in that, but he's also not. He's like the least of the stars. He gets the least screen time, I feel like.
He's
in
more.
that movie.
He's like 50% Al Pacino. He's not, whereas Dunkachino is like 150%.
Yeah. Great movie though. Still, Glengarry Glen Ross. Jack Lemmon in that movie is great. We just watched a Jack Lemmon movie last night
Yeah,
that we're going to be
definitely
talking
an
about
underrated actor.
on a future episode, but we'll get there.
Something to keep in mind if you ever get back, and you should get back to Heat. Definitely do.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most method Pacino performances. There's an interview he did. I think it was like at a like Q&A for like Golden Globes or Oscars or like some kind of event that he did, where he talks about how like the character he plays, Vincent Hanna, is like this like on edge detective who's like, trying to bust these criminals, but like he's clearly like a cokehead, and to get to that cokehead kind of performances, he might have done a lot of
Might have,
coke.
allegedly.
Might have.
Like on camera as well. There was like a cut scene where he did a line that they ended up using. So like, just keep in mind while you watch this, like he is coked up like the whole time.
Interesting.
That's
Okay.
actually nuts.
That's pretty nuts, right? Like,
So all that said, I'm going to find you a VHS copy of Dog Day Afternoon. I'm going to put a little bow on it. I'm going to put it in your mailbox, and then we should talk
it's a
about
great
Dog Day
watch.
Afternoon. Because if you
As
like,
someone that's non-Al Pacino fan.
yeah, it's a performance from Al Pacino that I think is closer to the Godfather than Heat or Scarface, but it's a great movie.
Mhm.
I'd love that. Any VHS you can give me, I'll gladly take them off your shelf.
Mhm.
Please and thanks.
I'm excited to see what the next two are.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, these ones are probably going to be a little less controversial.
Okay.
Or actually, you know what?
You never know.
I mean, you probably didn't think Heat was going to be controversial with us.
I thought Heat was like a nice, easy, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it's just Al Pacino. But
Yeah.
this one I feel is not going to be very controversial.
Okay.
Actually, the latter one might be. Who knows?
We'll see.
But this is, and I'll just put Heat aside. Rudy Ray Moore,
Okay.
upside down, in The Human Tornado.
That's a nice
Okay.
cover. I like that.
It's a very nice cover. I have the first Dolomite
Nice.
and like a shitty broken copy of Disco Godfather that does not work. All these covers are super 70s blaxploitation.
Yeah, I like that. That's very nostalgic.
And this is his second feature film. It is a direct sequel to Dolomite. So this
Mhm.
is still the Dolomite character, but this time it's cranked up a lot because he just made like $10 million. So now he's going all out.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if the audience can see it, but it says Rudy Ray Moore in Dolomite 2.
Oh, it says that?
Yeah, there's even like
At the very top, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
it's a nerve shattering, brain splattering, mind boggling, a one man disaster.
Yeah.
It's it's definitely one of the best like Rudy films. This one and PD Wheatstraw, but I don't actually have that one on VHS. I have all of them on DVD though. Yeah, huge fan of blaxploitation, and the reason I specifically picked this one was because it actually has. We mentioned earlier these movies having some sort of like personal significance, and Rudy as more than just a character and a performer, but as a person, I find great inspiration from. When he first started doing movies, he was in his 50s, and he had done, music. He had done different performances. He had been like dancing. He tried so hard to be an artist. He tried so hard to do all these different things that never quite worked out, and it got to a point where like he got this old and he got this far and he never gave up. He never stopped. He used to like sling vinyls from some of his comedy records out of his like trunk.
That's cool.
When he made the first Dolomite, he made it with like loans that he got from these guys, and he basically signed his life away. And if he didn't make
Like a loan shark.
I think it was either a loan shark or like this studio that wanted to like produce some of his stuff that he borrowed money from. I think it was like 50K or something. And back then, like especially
That's
the
a lot.
70s, like that's a lot more than 50K. So he basically signed that up, and not knowing if he was going to make that money back, he trusted in the process. He trusted himself. He made the movie, and it came out. He basically couldn't get any distribution because it's very like out there. The humor is very crude, and especially
Not as marketable.
it's
Yeah.
not very marketable. It's not like it's not an Eddie Murphy type. Although he did play Rudy Ray Moore in the Rudy and Ray Moore biopic
Yeah.
on Netflix.
Sick.
So he basically he made the movie, and he used to like have the reel for it, and he put it in his trunk, and he drove from like town to town, city to city, and he would just like pay theaters to like play his movie, and just that's how he did his distribution. As he used to just kind of like go
That's
around
awesome.
and get people
Yeah.
to screen it for him, like just like super dedicated, like never gave up on his stuff, and eventually it got noticed. It got picked up by a studio, it got distribution, and it made up to $10 million. And at that age that he is, like we often kind of feel like, oh, maybe I started too late, or maybe like my prime is gone. But like this guy was doing that at 50. This guy took like 5 decades to break in, and it's just that perseverance, that passion, that like that mentality that he had, like I think is really, really inspirational. And just like I see him as one of my greatest idols. Like I really admire his work, and his movies, as like unconventional as they are very entertaining.
Yeah.
But definitely, like if you haven't heard of Rudy or you're not familiar, definitely check out the I think it's called Dolomite Is My Name. It's a movie on Netflix. It's with Eddie Murphy. It also has like I'm blanking, Wesley Snipes and a bunch of different, like it has a lot of cool
Cool.
actors in there. But real quick before I pass it on to you, I want to talk a bit about like a significance that this has for me, because when I actually premiered that movie that we co-directed that I talked about at Digi60, I think we talked about imperfections, and we talked about just kind of starting out, doing your first short and your first project. It's a bit daunting, it's stressful, and you're obviously not going to have everything perfect as you envisioned and you hoped for. And I think after the premiere, I was a bit sad. We had to cut it down to about half. There were certain actors that like were completely cut out of it, which was very unfortunate. And I felt really bad about that. So like I wasn't very motivated to make more and to keep it going. So one of my good friends, Norm Leduc, that actually I met in college, he basically calls me. He's like, yo, like after this, just come over. We'll watch 2 movies and you'll feel a lot better. So he showed me Ed Wood and he showed me Dolomite. And
both kind of
Nice,
have
yeah.
similar themes almost in a way.
yeah,
You know?
it's those like just trying to make it,
Yeah,
you know,
scrappy.
exactly. And it just like not only did it make me feel so much better, but it actually inspired me. So shout out to Norm for that, because these are just great movies, and I'm really grateful to actually have those on my roster now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a piece of shit now because Ed Wood is another movie that we got like half an hour into and then
No,
shut
I
off.
haven't seen it, so I don't know who you watched it with.
No, it's probably alone.
So we watched Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is probably Ed Wood's most famous film.
Yeah.
And
This would've
that
been a
movie's
while
not
ago.
good, but people still talk about it. And like he made it for a low budget. And like he made a movie. We know how hard it is to even just make it and have it released and stuff like that. So the fact that he did it is significant. And the same with
Definitely.
this is, you know, he started a little bit later in life, but like, you know, he made it happen for himself. That's, you know, for a lot of creatives, we have to make it happen for ourselves. A lot of people don't get like a lucky shot at something right off the bat.
No one's
you
going to
know?
hand you something.
You know, unless you're like a Nepo baby. But for most of us, we really have to put ourselves out there. And I like that comparison a lot.
Yeah, super inspirational. Now, I want to say, I don't think I've ever seen a blaxploitation movie. And in fact, I would go so far as to say, I don't even really know what the true definition of a blaxploitation movie is. So would you care to put it into your own words if I was like, what's this all about?
Mm-hmm.
So
and
which I
why
am.
you're drawn to it.
As a genre, it's basically what we just talked about, but the whole bit, it technically died because you can look at it it's in a very short window. It's basically early to late 70s is where it started and
Mhm.
stopped. And what it was just kind of people of color that didn't have some of the opportunities that you know, other demographics had for making these kinds of films.
Mhm.
And they basically looked at the studios and they said, go f yourselves. We're going to take our own money, take our own people, and we're going to make our own movies. And a lot of it is guerrilla. A lot of these, you know, people in the movies, like anytime you see like cars or people walking down the street, half the time they don't really know that they're being filmed. That's
Makes
where
sense.
the exploitation aspect, from my understanding, comes from.
Gotcha.
Oh.
Because they just went and filmed a gorilla, which
Yep.
Dolomite, the very first film, is exactly that. By this one, they had like studio backing, because what happened is it actually became very popular. It hit a demographic that hadn't been touched before.
Mhm.
And there's a great quote from Rudy that I'm gonna butcher, but it was basically when he was trying to make a case for his movie, he was like, the studios were telling him, well, this only applies to a very small, you know, neighborhood. Like I think it was like 2 blocks or so. But he argued, he was like, well, no, but there are those same 2 blocks in every city in America.
It's true, yeah.
So studios eventually picked up on that and started making kind of more big budget and highly produced blaxploitation films, like a lot of the Pam Grier stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Coffee Brown, Foxy. Just Coffee and Foxy Brown. A lot of those movies were more like studio films. They weren't like guerrilla shooting style, but
Mm-hmm.
they still have that same essence. They still cater to the same demographic. It's very much just made for Black people in the hood in the 70s, and it's unapologetic in what it's trying to be. So that's the best way I can encompass it.
I appreciate that.
I like that.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of their way of like breaking down gatekeeping. Like we'll do it ourselves and we'll show you why it's great and why you should be showing it. It seems like they accomplished that.
Absolutely. And they like I said earlier, they inspired like Tarantino's like probably his whole career.
Yeah,
Jackie Brown is a blaxploitation homage. He
with
even
Pam Grier.
with
Yeah.
Pam Grier, and he just like he takes Foxy Brown, makes it Jackie Brown, keeps the same font. He uses like themes from like across 110th Street, Bobby Womack. He even has some of the music from Coffee in the soundtrack.
That
Like
makes sense, yeah.
it's jam packed with that kind of stuff, and I love that movie.
I always find that so exciting when a director is like, oh, this movie that I saw like decades ago, that was made even decades before that, really inspired me in my directing journey. And now I'm actually going to work with that person, you know, like
That's
I
so
feel like,
cool.
you know, Wes Anderson working with Bill Murray, once Bill Murray was like
Yeah.
at a certain point in his career
Or
where he was a
Bud
little bit
Cort.
older.
Yeah.
Bud Cort. Yeah. Again, Wes Anderson collection, we were reading that he was inspired by Harold and Maude, where Bud Cort was, I guess, a young one.
He was a teen.
A teen, and then he, as an adult, he went and cast him in Life Aquatic. I find that such an intriguing and
Like full circle.
full circle
Yeah.
moment, which is super cool. And speaking of intriguing, I'd love to know what the third film in that bag is.
I'm gonna put these aside because this one is not a tape.
Okay.
It's we've chatted a bit about it before.
Okay.
And I have this one in a format that you guys can enjoy because I want you to watch it.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Sounds good.
And because you know that we haven't seen it, or
I know for a fact you haven't seen
Okay.
it and you've been meaning to see it, hopefully.
Okay.
So the third movie is Mr.
Ooh,
Upside Down
okay.
Again.
Oh, okay.
David
I have
Lynch,
been meaning to see it. Yeah.
Eraserhead.
Even just looking at the cover, it's
Amazed.
freaking me out a little bit.
Andrew doesn't like feel bad movies, and I'm assuming this will be a feel bad movie.
Is it a feel bad movie or is it a feel weird movie?
Feel bad movies don't exist in my opinion. I think that like
Okay. Let's hear it.
I think that that's just kind of like a weird way to approach darker themes. Like there are feel good movies that are literally designed to like be crowd pleasers in that sense, but like it's not like David Lynch set out to like make people uncomfortable. At least that I understand, because we don't really know what he's thinking at any given moment. But yes, it is a dark movie. Like it's not you're not going to walk away feeling very, you know, happy or just kind of like, let's say this. If you're in a horrible mood, you're not going to feel kind of reinvigorated by this movie.
Okay, yeah.
But there's a lot of I think that if we look at it based on just like a black and white lens of like, will this make you feel good or will this make you feel happy? That's when we're kind of like pigeonholing it. This movie is
That's fair.
not meant to make you feel good, but it's not meant to make you feel bad either. If anything, it's meant to make you feel, I think personally, it makes me inspired. It gets me to be a little more introspective. And it's, I think that it was, he told me it was his most, well, he didn't tell me because I wasn't ever talking to
You
David
wish, yeah.
as much as I wish. But
Yeah.
in a, I think it was a podcast that he was saying it's one of his most spiritual films. I might be butchering that, but basically it's a very introspective film. And because it's his directorial debut, there's a lot to look at in the way that he made it, and he's not quite like honed in his craft yet. So whereas like some of his other work, you can sit there and be like, I have no idea what's happening at all. This one's a lot easier to crack the code. It's earlier in his journey, and he hasn't quite mastered the art of the Lynchian yet. So if you go here's what I'll tell you. If you go into it thinking or expecting it to make you feel bad, it probably will.
Okay.
But if you shift your brain to like, well, this is a movie he made with no money, it took him 5 years, and you kind of compare it to your own journey and you try and find inspiration in that, I think that there's a lot that we can take away from it.
I definitely think that mindset going into a movie is more important than a lot of people give it credit for.
For sure.
You know, like if I had gone into Heat being told that it was more of a slow burn, I think I might have been okay with it.
More
Same-
prepared.
Same with when we watch Running Time. I put on Running Time with no context to you. I didn't say anything. I was just like, I picked a movie. Here it is, right? But if I had, and then you watch and you were like, oh, that was really interesting. That was cool. But if I was like, I have a movie from the late 90s starring Bruce Campbell, that's a one take style movie, you would have been like, all right, yeah, bring it on. And then you might have been disappointed.
Like
Because
underwhelmed.
you picture a movie in your head based on me saying that, and then it might not live up to what you pictured in your head, you know? So I do think it'll be good going into Eraserhead with a certain expectation. It's the same reason why I didn't like 2001: A Space Odyssey when I first saw it, because I went in expecting totally the wrong thing, and the second time I saw it, I knew what I was going into, and I liked it a lot more. But with David Lynch's films, I think you're probably right. I think he, as a director, probably doesn't set out to make feel bad movies, but I do think feel bad movies exist, or feel bad stories exist. Like, I haven't read very much Stephen King, but based on what I've read, it really seems to me like he sets out to make the audience feel upset and gross and depressed based on things that I had seen.
I think there's certainly a lot more nuance to Stephen King in general.
Okay. Again, I haven't read Stephen King.
He deals with a lot of specific themes, but I do think, the genre of maybe like horror is designed to get under your skin, but you're going into that expecting it to get under your skin. Like, you want to be scared. So I think you go in with that expectation. You're not necessarily want to feel bad. You just want to be spooked.
Sure. I guess so. And I feel like you're probably right. David Lynch does not set out to do that.
As far as we know, because he's very closed off about his work and what it's trying to achieve. So, if anything, your interpretation of it is just as valid as mine or anybody else's.
That's true.
That's fair.
But he has been known to be like a generally like very nice guy and actually like very positive, like weirdly enough. So I don't think that he would set out to do that. But the beauty about Eraserhead is that a lot of it also is like it's guerrilla. So it's got that same kind of essence that some of the earlier blaxploitation movies have, and maybe some of our own work has, because we've definitely done guerrilla, and we definitely will do some more guerrilla as no budget filmmakers. But yeah, if you look at it in a lens of this is his first film, and he's kind of at the same point of his career that we are at, I think that there's a lot to take away from it. And additionally, because this is the Criterion Collection, this is the 4K rendition, and there's also a short documentary with David Lynch that specifically talks about Eraserhead. So if you want to like take a peek at that after and maybe get some more crumbs to the bigger puzzle, that'd be really cool. There's also like a book.
Yeah.
You have all of his short films in here. This is like
cool.
Your David Lynch starter pack.
That's awesome.
I love that.
I'm looking forward to watching it as like a unique experience, So you've laid out these 3 movies here. How would you say these movies influence the movies that you desire to make or desire to work on?
I think that it's definitely inspired me to be less traditional. I'd like to make movies that are more geared towards, my interests and my, honestly, just like fulfilling the vision that I set out to do, rather than trying to please everybody. Because it's come, I think we all come to a point where we realize that like you're never going to be able to do that. And the only way to make a great movie is if you make it for yourself and everybody else is invited. I think that's either a Denis Villeneuve quote or a Tarantino quote. I think it's Denis Villeneuve, but
I like that.
Specifically, as of late, David Lynch, because I actually went from Eraserhead all the way to Inland Empire, and I watched his entire filmography. I even watched like some of his like not failed pilots, but there were like on the air and hotel rooms that had like only like 6 episodes each. Like I went deep on those, and the biggest takeaway from some of the Lynch films and a lot of the Rudy and the blaxploitation stuff is just do it, man. Just make your movie,
try.
Make it as authentic, make it as true to yourself as you can, and don't be afraid to be provocative. Don't be afraid to portray certain themes and elements that are going to be controversial, because these are like these would not play well in theaters today. And some of my favorite works, my favorite directors know and understand that and are comfortable with taking those risks. And that's the kind of creator I set out to be, and that's the kind of creations I set out to inspire, is authentic work that is also provocative, not in a way that's like trying to rile up feathers, but in a way that's really just authentic to that filmmaker and that filmmaker's like actual vision.
I love that. That's
Mm-hmm.
such a fantastic answer. Now, moving away from the inspirational side of filmmaking, as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, what approach do you take towards directing a set and running a production?
Ooh. So my directing experience has been very, I guess I'll call it unusual, in the sense that both the shorts that I personally directed and co-directed have had very, very tight time constraints put upon them. One of them for Digi60, which is like a 2-month challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and Grime was basically we had like a 3-hour window to shoot about half the movie because the location we were in was about to close. So I guess it's been a bit more of like a quick thinking, problem solving kind of directing style, which directing is problem solving essentially. But I really do love the more traditional set structure of, here is, your director of photography, your makeup wardrobe, your set designers. And I like to kind of give those people those roles, and not to kind of say that you can't collaborate on these things. Like I think collaboration is super, super important, but to allow those people to have their own creative vision and their own kind of voice within those roles, and not have that interrupted by like somebody else stepping in and like doing your job or taking over for you. So like I usually like to kind of keep things more traditional in that sense, with a lot of room for collaboration and experimenting. But yeah, most the experience I've had so far has been like very kind of blitz, very spur of the moment. There's been a lot of improv that we've done, a lot of
That's fun.
we call them like impromptu shorts. But yeah, I hope to do a lot more kind of like highly prepared, highly kind of just super pre-produced work, so that we can like show up and get a lot more time to experiment with the set and the actors, and because really the one thing you lose from just having to rush things is like you don't have as much room to play. You don't have as much room
Yeah.
to have fun and try out new things, which I found is always beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had like an actor or a collaborator like suggest something and it like not working out. I mean, sometimes like we opt for, a safety or different options, but if anything, I find that it only ever elevates it, because like 2, 3, 4 minds is always better than one.
Mm-hmm.
You're not always going to be able to think of everything, have every cool idea. Like
Absolutely.
you can't gatekeep that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just hope to have more room to actually like let the production breathe and let people have time to experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of my favorite parts of Coffee to Cocktails were just random stuff that we came up with on set, like the little random cameos and like improvs and stuff. Those are
Yeah.
like ended up being the funniest parts almost.
Because those weren't planned. I don't remember seeing those in the script.
No.
For Latham's, I asked him ahead of time, like, hey, do you want to do a little thing on camera? I have a little something in mind, but it was still pretty impromptu, I would say. Now, speaking of moving towards future projects, what's next on the horizon for you that you're most excited about? Whether it's 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. Well, right now we are hard at work finishing that short film that me and Sydney co-directed. There's a lot of stuff in the works that I'm helping produce. There's a short film by Christian Guérin that's coming up in. We're gonna probably aim to have that out by December. We're starting shooting in September. I'm doing another collaboration with a longtime collaborator, Gigi Packer, who was actually my one of my leads in Grime.
Nice,
She's
yeah.
having her directorial debut, which is really
That's exciting.
exciting.
Cool.
And then behind, even further back, there are many projects that I'm either doing outlines for or working on, planning to start work on my first feature. I think
Awesome.
yeah, we've talked about that a little bit, how we're in a bit of a similar stage for our next big project like that. But that's still at least a year away for it to begin shooting. But I think more directly is that we have a lot of short films in pre/production, and we have those two that are about to come out very, very soon. So just keeping an eye out for those ones, and really excited for them to actually hit the ground and be able to actually have stuff to show for all the work that we put in, and just have that pay off, really.
Exactly. I always said my favorite part of filmmaking is, seeing a moment really come to life, whether it's on set and someone's like giving a performance, you're behind the camera being like, yeah, or like putting together a scene and seeing it for the first time play out and being like, there it is right there, or showing it to a crowd and having that moment of payoff where you get the reaction that you were hoping for. So that's awesome. Looking forward to seeing more stuff from you come down the pipeline. Where can people find your work, or maybe reach out to you if they want to see some stuff that you've done?
As far as seeing my work, because of my unfortunate perfectionism, you can't see my work. What you can check out is work that I've been a part of. One that comes to mind is a movie by Hasib Hani that I acted in recently. It actually, you guys saw it at Digi60, which was very cool.
Did it win an award?
It's
you betcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It won Best Picture, and it won Best Acting.
There you go.
So it did very well. It's been selected recently for the Toronto Arab Film Festival.
Amazing.
So
Cool.
we'll be hitting more festivals this summer, which is really exciting. And then go check out This Isn't the End by Emilia Potosiniak and Jesse Coombs. Really great film. I think it's not available just yet. It just had its premiere. We're looking to have it, hit festivals and potentially go on a streaming platform of sorts. But just keeping an eye out on socials, Instagram, Facebook, and always posting on there, always keeping in touch. And especially this summer, a lot of great stuff to come. Very excited about that.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for coming and talking to us. I love talking to you about filmmaking because this is always what happens is we end up just like spiraling down this rabbit hole for like an hour and a half. And I come out the other side having to like completely reevaluate so many things that I thought I knew and understood about liking movies and watching movies and the filmmaking process. So it's always a very invigorating conversation on my end.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And likewise, it's a lot of fun talking to you guys. This podcast has been like a long time coming.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm hoping we get to have some more collaborations like these for many years to come.
Definitely. Sure. So I do want to say this is episode 50 of the podcast. We didn't say this up front, but I have a little bit of an announcement. We are actually going to be bringing the podcast to a close in about 10 episodes or so. That'll be the end of season 3, 60 episodes total. We just feel like that's a good spot. And if you want to know why specifically that we're ending it, reach out and ask, because there are some reasons. And if you want to know, I'd be happy to tell you. But
yeah,
we're going to do another couple of episodes of interviews with some other people. And then we're going to be returning to our lesson of film history and hitting those big heavy hitter films that we've never watched before. I think we have about 6 left on our list. We've condensed the list to just the ones that we really want to get to. And episode 60 is planning to be the last one. I'm not saying that we'll never do another one. Maybe once in a while we'll pop out a bonus one if we're feeling in the mood. But that's the way that the cookie's going to crumble in the next couple of months.
That's right.
Look out for those last 10 or so episodes, and we'll catch you in episode 51. Thanks so much for listening.